I'm especially grateful to be here because Fairleigh Dickinson has been so good to me. They let me take my advanced degree at the TNA campus, and with that advanced degree, I was able to take the examination for a patent agent, which means I was exposed to a lot of inventors and their ideas. And I thought, hey, I can do that too. So I became an inventor. Now, my talk tonight is supposed to be about entrepreneurship at any age. Entrepreneurship is a very complex idea. My husband has written a book, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. This is not a commercial, in which he says that an entrepreneur has to be both an innovator and a developer, a marketman, a manager of change, so that his ideas are being integrated in society. There are very few people who are able to fill that role, to be both an inventor and a business manager. Thomas Edison was undoubtedly one of the greatest inventors. However, all the businesses which he started failed. Not exactly at the same time, but they never made it. They went down slowly. So this is really very difficult, and I have only half an hour at most. So I will talk only about entrepreneurship as an innovation and not about the change maker or manager. And I also want to dispose of that age business. People think you cannot be an inventor when you're old, because when you're old, you're looking back toward the past. You know, oh, the good olden days. When I was a child, this would not have been allowed, that sort of thing. But when you're an inventor, you look forward. You are an opportunist. You have to have an optimistic outlook. So this is one of the requirements. And I would say you can have that at any age. There are other qualifications for being inventor at an advanced age. You have to be in reasonably good physical and mental health. You have to have a lot of energy, patience, and perseverance, because it takes a long time until your brainchild is developed. You also should have some emotional support, because there are a lot of disappointments and frustrations while you are developing an idea. Everything costs 3 times as much as you anticipated and takes 3 times as long. You also need financial support. Somebody who provides you with food and shelter for a year or 2 or 3 until your business takes off. Even if you make a profit, you have to plow it back into the business. You can't take it out to buy a new car or something. And also, there is one caveat. As an older person, you cannot tap the investors. The venture capitalists put their money on young people with a greater life expectancy, of course. Apart from that, anybody at any age who is willing to take risks can be an entrepreneur in the sense in which I indicated, an innovator. Having a bright idea is very risky. It's a gamble. The odds are 500 to 1. Some make it, some make it big, some make it just with an acceptable level of competence and gain. Now, it's not necessarily that your product fails because it is no good. You meet with a lot of indifference. People are obtuse. Why should I buy that? There is also a question of time lag. The time may not be right for your development. Everybody thinks, knows, that Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. No, There was a German by the name of Philip Rees who invented the telephone 10 years earlier. But people didn't think they needed it. One of the men said, "Isn't the telegraph good enough?" But 10 years later, they recognized the value, and Alexander Graham Bell was accepted. I had a similar experience in my life, and I could kick myself that I did not develop an idea. I invented a pulse rate meter, which, you know, when you go to the doctor, they check your pulse rate and your blood pressure and so on. You were anxious, or you have just had a cup of strong coffee, so your pulse rate goes up, and 20 minutes later it goes down. I thought it would be of value if you had a device which measured your pulse rate consistently over a period of time. So I invented a wrist strap which recorded it, and from time to time the doctor would put it on his screen and see it. I showed it to a cardiologist, and she said, "Good idea, but there is no market for it." She did not anticipate the fitness craze. You know, when you do aerobics, every 15 minutes, I check your pulse rate and you go here. So I'm sorry I dropped my idea, because now it's advertised for $49.50. It might have been a success. So, well, with all these risks, I was quite aware of all these risks, of course, but nevertheless, when I came up with a bright idea, I said, this time I'm going to go ahead with it. And not all inventions. What shall I say? They say necessity is the mother of invention. But there are lots of inventions that necessity is not the mother of. So my idea came because my husband was a speaker. He was also nearly deaf. And when you're deaf, you do not hear how loud you speak, because you don't get the echo back. So I had to sit in the last row, and when his voice dropped, I had to wave my arms louder, louder. Now, the wife of a speaker can do that, but the people in the audience are much too polite to interrupt the speaker, so they sit like this, and they cup their ears, and say, "What did he say? What did he say?" So, after a while, I had heard some of those lectures several times, and I thought there must be a better way for a speaker to recognize the volume of his voice. I just thought, how about a display in lights which shows the speaker how loud he speaks? And I thought, we have a microphone. The microphone transforms the voice into a number of lights, and the lights go off and on depending on the loudness of his voice. At that stage, I had two options. I could have given my idea to a company who buys all those ideas and then develops them, or I could have gone into manufacturing myself. Now, some of the companies were approached. We are not terribly interested. Maybe they didn't want to do business with an old lady, and the other ones wanted too much of the action. They wanted 90% of what I was making. I said, no. So I looked around, how can I translate my idea into an apparatus? And I found a retired electronic engineer by the name of Obi O'Brien, who lived in Rescue, California. That's a small place near Sacramento, and we took our name, RSQ, from his hometown, Rescue. So Obi and I met several times, and we decided, yes, we can go into business together. And Obi calculated how much it would cost to produce our device, and how many units we would have to sell to become profitable. And he was, amazingly enough, it was quite accurate. What we had in mind was a self-contained box on which the light-emitting the diodes were arranged on a bar which could be moved around. So you would put the bar here or there in the speaker's line of vision, even if you put the box elsewhere. Also, we decided to have two microphones. One was built into the box, and the other one was to be on a cable, so that the speaker would stand here. You could still speak into the microphone and here, and that would cut out the first microphone so you didn't have any overlap. We also decided that it would run on a battery, a rechargeable battery, but also on household current. So we had those details pretty much worked out. And so we registered our company as RSQ, and we made some prototypes out of cardboard and wire. Really primitive things which we took around and showed people. And they had suggestions which we incorporated. It was very helpful. And then he made some more and more until we finally thought we have a design which we can use. And so I thought, hey, now all we have to do is to buy those boxes and somebody who makes those light-emitting diodes on the circuitry, and we put them in, and then we're in business. And that was really dumb of me. I had no idea how many decisions you have to make. Should the box be of plastic, out of metal? It had to have a lid because everything was going to be stored inside in order to transport the box around. What size? It should be manageable so that you could carry it around. But it shouldn't be too small so that the speaker wouldn't walk away with it by accident. We looked in catalogs, nothing was available. We also needed a box with a lid which the user could open and close in order to put the light-emitting diodes and everything else in. Should it be sliding? Should it be fitted? Should it be hinged? And all the decisions we had to make. We had to decide how to calibrate the diodes. Finally, we decided by decibels. So if you speak at a certain loudness, you speak at so and so many decibels. If you speak louder, then another light goes on, and then another light. At that time, you could only get those diodes in two colors, in red or green. Now you can get blue and yellow and everything. So we decided we have a series of white lights, a series of green lights, and a series of red lights. The speaker would say at the beginning, "Can you hear me?" And somebody would say yes or no. Then he looked at this display, and if the lights did not go on, he knew he didn't speak loud enough, so he had to speak louder till the next light went on, and the next light. Incidentally, we found later on that there was even a use for our device with autistic children who speak too loud. The red light was always on. We have only anecdotal evidence. We have not made a study, but people have told us. They trained their child in front of the machine and said, now you have to speak so that no red light shows. And the children learned it eventually. Then they took the children to a friend's house. And the child began to yell, autistic children. And the mother would say, the red light shows. The child would pipe down. So it worked two ways. Anyhow, so in order to find back to the boxes, we had to have a box built. And I drove around New Jersey to find somebody who was willing. And we found a sheet steel fabricator who agreed to be ordered 100 units, that he would build us 100 units. In the meantime, Obi had made a list of all the parts we need, 70 or 80, with all the manufacturer's parts numbers, which we had to get for those. It was no use to buy them from the manufacturer because they only sell in lots of 100,000 or something like that. So I took that list and I went to all the discount houses and Radio Shack and the surplus places to pick the shot diodes and the Zener diodes and the capacitors and heaven knows what else. I got all those parts together. And then I thought, now, all we need is to get an assembler and put that thing back to work. And we'll be in business. Far from it. I found an assembler. Yeah, I must say, in New Jersey, everything is 30 miles. In California, everything is 30 miles from where you are. So I drove 30 miles, found an assembler. And he said, oh yes, I can do it. And he said, but who is going to do the layout? I said, what? I thought you did it. Oh, no, I don't do that. Who does the circuit boards? 2 circuit boards. Who does those? I don't do that. Who does it? Steve. I'll call him up and tell him you want to see him. Well, Steve lives 30 miles to the east. So I went to Steve. Yes, I can do the circuit boards for you. Who's going to do the layout? What? I thought you did it. No, Helen does it. Now, sometimes I thought this is not going to end. Everybody says, I don't do it, I'll call somebody else does it. So fortunately, Helen was the last link. So I called Helen and said, come and see me. I went, fortunately, only 10 miles to another place. In the suburbs, it was an ordinary house. But the only thing that distinguished it from its neighbors, that the windows were blacked out. You can always tell if a computer person or a marijuana grower lives in the first floor, the windows are black. So I had the street number, so it was Helen Bassey. And she came to the door in sweats with a cat at her foot. I said, oh, is she a techie? She is, and she was, and she took me to her lab. It was perfectly organized. She was busy developing the layout for a hydrological project for a state in India. I mean, big time. Yes, she can do it, but it will take some time. She only works half-time. Mornings she works for her church. In the afternoon she does technical work. She was so unlikely as a techie. I asked, how did you get into that business? And she said, I was a school teacher, and then I had arthritis, and I couldn't run after the 4th graders, so I took early retirement. And I was bored, so for a while I did crossword puzzles. And one day I sent for a kit, how to build your own radio. And I looked at the blueprint, at the drawing. I said, hey, I can do that much better. And then she began to draw a blueprint, and she's in very great demand up to this day. So finally, we got our samples built, 5 to begin with and 100 to come. And we took them around and we painted them ourselves and showed them to many people. And we got even some orders. And then we were encouraged and said, now let's order the 100 first. We have the chassis and we have everything else. Let's order them. We made problems. They had to be spray painted. The chassis manufacturer said, they are ready. I'll send them to the spray painter. Spray painter called up. They are faulty. The manufacturer did not allow enough clearance for the hinges when you apply paint. The boxes don't close. Back to the manufacturer. He was furious and said, I'll never work for you again. Well, it was not our fault, it was his fault. So we had to take every box apart so that the hinges were at a certain distance, back to the spray painter. Then the spray painter, from there we put the logo on, and so forth and so on. And finally, we had our 100 boxes. We were ready to sell. At that stage, of course, we should have had brochures professionally done with graphics and text and everything. But we were working on a shoestring, so we decided we could do that ourselves. I tried to write copy, and I showed it to somebody who said, you will never make it as a copywriter for Campbell Soups. I said, okay. I'm not trying to write advertising for Campbell Soups, I'm trying to write advertising for our box. And then, of course, we had to have brochures printed, we had to find stationery, we had to find the wrapping paper, and all this took great time because we couldn't just go and order it. We had to scrounge around, at United Parcel Service, do you have some surplus boxes of force and so on. In the meantime, I wrote also the patent application and started a search for a trademark. Now, I don't know if any of you considers patenting your device. Don't. It is very expensive, and anybody, almost anybody, can infringe a patent, which means steal it. And if General Electric or DuPont steals your patent, you do not have the money to fight a lawsuit against them, so you might as well forget about it. When Visivox, the people who invented Xerox method, took their invention around, it took some years before they found a small company who was willing to buy it, a Haloid company in Rochester, New York. Now, the inventors of Xerox had taken out a patent, but the Haloid company took out an additional 26 patents just to protect it. And that's why nobody could copy it first. Now, trademark search is also extremely expensive. You come up with a great name, and then you don't know whether somebody has already used it before. It's an enormous number. So at first, we thought this is a unique name, but I thought we'll risk $600 for one word search. Unfortunately, the word was no longer available, and I said we cannot possibly spend $600 for every word we come up with. So Obi and I did it for ourselves, and finally we came out with the word Visivox. Now, we had some idea where our market would be. Of course, I developed it for professional speakers, but there are not enough of them. There must be other people. So we decided we ought to have some market research done. But before you have a ready product or process, you cannot ask people because they have not seen it. They have no idea what they want. Of course, you ask your friends and your family, do they like it? They say, oh, yes, 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 but don't take the word for it. They are not your customers. So we tried by trial and error to find out. We found that business companies were a very good market for us because they used it in their training seminars to teach the salesmen to speak at a consistent volume of voice. You know how irritating it is when you talk to somebody in a company on the telephone, and the telephone, automatic or in person, says, we'll call you back as soon as possible. Our number is... Of course, the person is familiar with their own telephone number. The person doesn't realize that you are not familiar, and therefore he or she must speak loudly and clearly. So that was a good market for us. Unfortunately, the speakers market was a disappointment because we had not counted on the ego of speakers. Everybody said, I speak loud enough, let's get a hearing aid. And it's understandable. The speaker is invited to speak. He doesn't want to see it reported. So-and-so gave an interesting talk which we all could hear because the speaker has a contract, he gets his money, he's not likely to come again, he doesn't care whether people hear him or not. We even found that in churches. I offered to give a free one to our church. The pastor said, I don't need it. Well, people can't hear him. And he doesn't expect people to hear him either. But a member of another congregation said, we cannot hear our priest and his disgrace. We want to buy your device. So I went to the church and they had an auditory engineer, and he said, absolutely, we have to have it. And the priest came and said, I don't care, people have to go to mass anyhow, so who cares what I say? But they bought it. They bought it, and they're very happy with it, I'm glad to see. Another idea we had was to put it in conference centers, in ballrooms where so many public speakers and meetings take place. This is a very poor acoustic environment because they're not made for speeches, they are made for parties and weddings and whatnot. And sometimes they divide it in half and draw a curtain, which changes the acoustics. So we said, how would you like it? No, because in the first place they would get into trouble with the acoustic engineers. And second place, they had already a contract with some acoustic engineers with the companies that supplies it. Now, it was difficult for us, almost impossible, to get national distribution because the people who sell those sound systems to hotels and so on have a big catalog. And the man said to me, look, be realistic. I'm trying to sell a $40,000 system. I'm not wasting much time to sell a 500 Visivox. So we found, by trial and error, customers who appreciate our device, so far have been our best customers, speech pathologists, who teach people to speak again. And we don't realize how many industrial accidents result in a loss of speech. Of course, it's in the interest of workers' compensation, of everybody else, to get those people back to work very soon. So speech pathologists really pay attention. They put those people, or people who had a stroke and learn to speak again, but that's another matter, in front of the Visivox and say, now today, I know you cannot say more than, you cannot even get one light on. Practice till you get one light on, and practice to keep that light on for 1 minute or whatever time. And tomorrow you practice 2 lights and so forth and so on until you have a full range. And then you begin to speak without seeing the lights. And that has proved to be quite effective. And we're very gratified by it. So it was quite a surprise for us to find a market which we had not anticipated. So that is where we are at the moment. And we still try to sell more and more. Obi has given up, and I have a new partner, and the two of us are at it. Now when I stand back, and I think, knowing all the difficulties and the sleepless nights, and will the Visivox so really satisfy your need? Would I start a business again? Yes, I probably would. It's great entertainment, very rewarding to see your ambition and ingenuity awarded in a modest way. Thank you very much. Anybody have questions? No? Okay.
So what's your next invention?
I can't hear.
What's your next investment?
Oh, I can give you lots of inventions if you want to, which I cannot do. For one reason or other, I've given up on that. Self-cleaning glass. Go ahead. That's very good if you have a skyscraper and all the glass work and you wouldn't have those people on scaffolding. Imagine, you would make a fortune. And another one. Want another one?
Yes.
Okay. When you are on a high school tennis teams, you're supposed to practice 1,000 serves a month. So you hit those balls and they disappear and you have to pick them up. It's very tedious. I thought if you put a little chip or a magnet in a tennis ball, and you have a remote and you click, and all those tennis balls come back to you. Now they have that for golf balls, you know. They have a chip in golf balls, and it doesn't come back to you, but it tweaks or something so you can find it if it's in the rough. I've seen them. But of course the golf ball is hard and the tennis ball is soft. My next idea, of course, supposing you put a magnet in the tennis ball and it comes back to you. So some clever guy will put a magnet on the strings and the tennis ball will always hit the strings and not sideswipe.
More questions?
More?
More inventions?
More ideas?
No questions? Make sure, let's give one, at least a question, one more question from some of the students here.
I couldn't.
Okay.
What was the name of your last product
I can't hear them.
What was the name of your last product
or invention?
or invention?
My last product?
Was
Well-
it Visivox or a different?
It's very trivial. Very trivial. One is, yeah. No, one is very difficult, and nobody has so far solved it. To lift a load over the bar of the trunk of a car into the car and take it out again. Not at the same time. You know how hard it is for people to load your luggage into the trunk. You go to the airport, you take it out. I want a luggage cart which does that. Then you take your luggage and roll it to the airplane. It's a very difficult problem because it's mechanical movement in 3 dimensions. Where do you get the power from? It cannot be hydraulic, it's much too heavy. You can get the power from the engine, that means boring a hole in the trunk wall. And if you want to sell a car, people don't want a car with holes. It's true. You could also run a line from the engine on the outside. But then when it rains, what do? You stand out in the rain. So I'm still struggling with that problem. Now there is I have to tell you, there is an engineering university where I live, Harvey Mudd College, you may have heard of it. It ranks after Caltech and MIT, so it's pretty good standards. And they took that project as a pro bono project for the students as a senior project. Every group of students has to deliver a project before they graduate. And usually those projects are sponsored by big companies, Lockheed or IBM and so on, and they give money to the university. What did they have? A self-contained survival environment for Arctic pilots and things like that, big things. But they thought your idea is good, especially in a community like Claremont, where there are several rehabilitation centers for seniors. So this is our contribution, so it sponsored that. But the students didn't find the answer, so it's still there.
Anything else? I'd like, one more question, okay.
Of all the courses and everything that you've taken, which do you think was the most important to where you are today?
Of all the courses you've taken, which do you think was the most important to get you where you are today?
That's hard to say. They all contributed. After I finished my degree, I went to NYU with the idea of getting my PhD in physics. But at that time, of course, I was not a youngster anymore, and physics is a young man's game. If you don't start at age 22 or 23, you're out. You cannot get a place on the research team, and I didn't want to go into teaching. But at that time, I did a course on magnetic resonance. That was just a new thing. It has been invented. And that got me a wonderful job with IBM as a market researcher for nuclear magnetic resonance instruments. At that time, IBM wanted to buy a company that was making those, and they wanted to know, they did real market research, whether there was customer acceptance for it. So for about a year, I traveled, especially in New Jersey, to pharmaceutical companies and talked to the people in charge of the instrument. Do you have one? Where is it? This was quite important. Most people had put it, it's a very heavy thing, on the ground floor where the loading dock was. But of course the loading dock has a lot of vibrations. When the trucks came in, of course it didn't function. And so on, so IBM learned a great deal about it, and I found it very interesting. As to the courses at Fairleigh Dickinson, I would say everyone is important. I wrote a master's thesis on the Doppler effect in microwaves that came in very handy in some of the ideas which I developed. So you never can tell.
One last question, and I'll ask it. In your lifetime, what do you think has been the most important invention?
The transistor.
Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Right there.